Can we call it a case of Erdogan fatigue? Turkey's president suffering a rare electoral setback in local elections, where even though his name was not on the ballot, Recep Tayyip Erdogan made the race, well, into a referendum about himself, tirelessly out on the campaign trail, and yet losing the capital, Ankara, locked in a dogfight to keep City Hall in his native Istanbul. The results appeared to indicate a growing rift between major cities and the rest of the country, with Erdogan's Islamist-rooted AK party consolidating its lock on power in the Anatolian heartland and losing ground in urban areas to the moderate opposition. On the southeast, the Kurdish-rooted HDP regained towns lost by decree in the crackdown on dissent that followed a failed coup in 2016. It's not only about the tightening of the screws. Erdogan blames a US-formented plot for the Lira slide and near 20% inflation, but many citizens aren't buying it. And with an economy in the throes of its first recession in a decade, what now for Turkey and its democracy? Today in the France 24 debate, we're wondering if it is a case of Erdogan fatigue. Joining us from Istanbul, commentator Onur Erim, former chief advisor to the Ankara municipality. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Sociologist and documentary filmmaker Deniz Bagriatçik is with us as well. How are you?
Fine, thank you.
Yavuz Baydar, editor-in-chief of the Aval News website.
Hello.
Welcome back. And we welcome to the show economist Rémi Bourgeot, associate fellow at IRIS, the French International Relations Institute think tank. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you.
The France 24 debate on Facebook and Twitter, hashtag F24debate. We're a long way, by the way, from definitive results, but with the AKP contesting the outcome in Istanbul, Ankara, and elsewhere, Selina Sykes has more.
He wasn't on the ballot himself, but Turkey's local elections have been seen as a referendum on the president. Recep Tayyip Erdogan was quick to declare victory, despite suffering some symbolic losses.
I believe the only reason we couldn't get the results we wanted in some cities is that we couldn't express ourselves enough to our nation, and we failed to win their hearts.
Erdogan has been dealt some major blows. His ruling AK party lost control of the capital, Ankara, for the first time in 16 years. Opposition leader Mansur Yavaş won the contest for mayor after beating a former government environment minister to the post. The AKP is also behind in another key race. According to the Electoral Commission, the Republican People's Party is in the lead in the country's largest city, Istanbul. Erdogan said his party will appeal the results wherever needed. But for the CHP, the result in Istanbul is already clear.
We want to cooperate with all of Turkey's institutions to quickly meet Istanbul's needs. Let Turkey return to normal now.
Despite the setbacks, the AKP and an allied nationalist party still won more than half of the votes across Turkey. Erdogan's party has won every election since coming to power in 2002. But the country's recent economic woes have tested voters' patience. Turkey is dealing with a weakened currency, 20% inflation and soaring food prices.
Onur Erim, it's interesting to listen to Recep Tayyip Erdogan in that report because he seemed to be conceding to a certain degree. What's the frame of mind inside the ruling party? Are they conceding in Ankara and Istanbul?
It seems that due to the closeness of the race in Istanbul, we're literally talking about 20,000 votes, give or take a few, over, I believe, close to 9 million votes. And given the fact that there are in the upwards of 320,000 votes that were cast incorrectly, and that's a very big meaning, and that there are some discrepancies in tallying the votes. We are still waiting for Istanbul. I think it may be another maybe a day or so to finalize this. But because the race is so close, I mean, the margin is so close, and the votes in question is so high. I think we're going to have to wait for another at least a day or two to finally call this election in Istanbul. In Ankara, although there are some moves by the AK Party administration for some recalls or recounts, I don't believe they also believe that there is going to be a difference in who's elected in Ankara.
So what happened? We heard him say that we failed in some people's hearts. How do you explain that?
Well, Erdogan has been very honest throughout his political career, especially when he criticizes himself. He has put, not today, 25 years ago, winning Istanbul would be winning Turkey, and losing Istanbul would be losing Turkey. So he's, I guess he takes as Istanbul as a loss, at least for momentarily. He feels that he couldn't reach out to the people, he couldn't reach out to the constituents, and that he finds that the fault of this at himself and at his party. And he is promising to correct these mistakes.
Yavuz Baydar, how do you interpret his remarks?
Well, he's accepting the reality that acrimonious, over-the-top usage of language, rhetoric, as well as coupled with the economic decline, brought him to this point. And he finally sees that he's prepared to give in, especially about Ankara and also about Istanbul, but he's very well aware that the new system, the new regime, stamped in 16th of April 2017, gives him extraordinary powers, super presidential powers to exert from central, from the center of Ankara to the local municipalities. So opposition, if whatever they win.
So you agree you're agreeing with Onur? It's a sober assessment that, well, we lost.
Definitely,
is what you think.
He's accepting this, but he's aware but he said some other things as well last night. He said there won't be any elections 4 more years, and
which is true.
I will be in power.
The next elections are in 4 years. This is the last time Turks went to the ballot.
He said,
for a long
I will
time.
be in power, and he meant to say, I will exert my authority, my powers to all the municipalities, because he's holding the taps over the funding, financial flows into these greater municipalities, including Istanbul and Ankara.
So is this election a parenthesis, or is it the beginning of a shift in momentum?
I think that we should, it's very important when Mr. Erdogan was saying, like, we should take back the hearts again, because, like, I think it's like he was always in the time of emotion, but in the big cities, it's a very symbolic thing that the big cities' emotions are not anymore in the scene. People are going to work and working hard, and the economics is very important. And the people who used to go to the big cities now returning back to the rural side of Turkeys. And this is one of the big change, I think, when the people are deciding to vote. I think we need to be prudent when we are analyzing the things, because it's a very new information, and in 2 days we will have more defining results. And I think it's very early to say how things to change. But I think people in the big cities choose with their economical situations more and more.
So Denise Bakriacic, the vote in Istanbul, is it a vote about the city of Istanbul and the politics of Istanbul, or is it, well, a referendum on Erdogan the way... I mean, he was so front and center during this campaign.
I think when we are talking about Turkey, it's never only politics, or it's never about the sociological things, but it's both of them. But the local election is always different from the general elections, and people are more voting for their cities, for the change, what they they were living, and for the years. And I think that environmental causes is so important in Turkey. Last years there was lots of urban change in the city. People were not happy what was going on. There are little green spaces people could go out, and I think they were not happy at all.
That they're being bulldozed.
Yes, and I think that really changed their decisions. But also I would love to underline that in general elections, there are lots of people who are voting from the foreigner countries, like who are living in European countries. And it's also like over 3 million people votes are not in the local elections, that we should pay also attention for that. It's not just the lose, but it is also very important to losing the big cities for, I think, for Mr. Erdogan. It's a psychological way.
Rémi Bourgeot, what was this election about?
Well, I do agree. I think that the economic side was important here, not just the macroeconomic picture. It's true that Turkey is barely out of a currency crisis that occurred in the middle of last year, but this situation of constant crisis has very clear repercussions for people's lives. There's a housing crisis and this skyrocketing inflation that has really impacted many households. So I think there's a great deal of disillusionment. People are worried about their livelihoods, about the cost of living, and that really has an impact on those inhabitants of the main cities like Istanbul, of Ankara, people who might have supported the AK Party in the past, but now are really questioning the overall strategy and very concrete things that are related to the management of the city and the affordable living, housing, and so forth.
There is another element, apart from the economy, which is the result of the tactical voting. There was enormous tactical voting about the element.
Yeah, let's look at a map. The overall percentage of the vote going to the alliance between the AKP and the conservative nationalist MHP, but the opposition doing well, particularly along the coast. And if you look at that map of Turkey, it's kind of interesting. Yavuz Baydar, this time around, when you compare to the last local elections in 2014, the opposition and the ruling AKP party both in alliances this time.
Yes, the map per se has not changed much, changed so radically. It shows us three Turkeys: Kurdish Turkey and heartland Anatolia, which is deeply conservative and nationalist, and the Western Anatolia and Thrace, which is secular, more Western-oriented, open-minded, etc. So this map hasn't changed. But what made these elections different from the earlier ones, unique, first one was the alliance building, which was bringing two blocks against each other, and the Kurdish bloc, which is about 7 million, roughly, Kurdish voters for the pro-Kurdish HDP party, alienated, even demonized, left out on its own. So what the Kurdish leadership did was deciding on a tactical voting, not standing for nominating any candidates for the greater municipalities such as Istanbul, Ankara, etc., saying that our aim is to bring down Erdogan as much as we can, and let us vote for the other candidates. And it seemed to have worked. All these greater municipalities, the win by the opposition bloc would not have happened without a doubt, without the 5-6 percentage points of Kurdish vote. So Kurds have become the key in this result, and they are going to continue to be the key for the future of Turkey if Turkey is ever to normalize and democratize. And they paid a little bit of a price in the mainly Kurdish provinces in the southeastern Turkey. They lost about 4 greater municipalities. One peculiar one is the province of Şırnak, whose population, because of the scorched-to-earth policies in the past 3 years, had gone down to only 38,000 people. And they were mainly bureaucratic people, or the militaries, etc. And they voted, and that meant that they lost the greater municipality. But the other of Şırnak, but the Diyarbakır, etc., slightly lower turnout than general, which is 83%, and that's 75% in Diyarbakır, but they are still keeping their traditional strongholds, the Kurdish strongholds in the area.
In the southeast, very quick point on this, Onur Eren, before we go to the break. A lot of municipalities had been run from Istanbul after local officials were deposed of power after that failed coup in 2016, and the rekindling of that all-out fight against the PKK. Are these newly elected people from the HDP, are they going to be able to keep their posts, or are they going to be booted out as well?
Well, it all depends on how they react. When the government, the central government, has appointed trustees, it was for a very, very valid reason. Their extensive, organic and direct ties with the PKK terrorist group vis-a-vis Kandil mountain. Now, when I hear the comments sometimes, especially since this morning from the West, I really am astonished as to whether we are actually assessing the same election, or we're assessing this, the same country. HDP, the pro-Kurdish party of Turkey, has lost immensely, especially in their powerhouses down the south and southeastern Turkey. Not only did they lose cities like Ağrı, Bitlis, Şırnak, and Tunceli, across the board, in every single province that their stronghold, they lost votes towards AK Party. In Şırnak, HDP got literally crushed, and there was I wish you could have seen it. There was a very mathematical explanation by the winning mayor of Şırnak as to how this quote-unquote lie about bureaucratic votes have affected. He showed by numbers that they had no effect at all, as opposed to 2014 local elections as well as the presidential elections. Now, what is going on in this east and the southeast is very important, because Erdogan was much criticized during his campaign, during this election, that his main point was the national survival issue. And when he was talking about this fact, he always referenced, very rightly so, to PKK and to Kandil. Now, everybody has argued that this will hit him back with the Kurdish votes.
And it didn't happen.
Since
Onur, I have to cut you off because we have to take a very quick break. We'll be right back. You're watching the France 24 debate.
Nope.
Welcome back, or welcome if you're just joining us. It's the France 24 debate, and we're digesting results from the last election Turkey will see for 4 years, according to the electoral calendar. Some setbacks for the ruling AKP in local elections. We're talking about it from Istanbul. Commentator Onur Erim, former chief advisor to the Ankara municipality, is with us. Welcome back. Welcome back as well to sociologist and documentary filmmaker Denise Bagriatchik. And welcome as well back to Yavuz Baydar, editor-in-chief of the Aval news website, and Rémi Bourgeot of IRIS, the French Institute of International Relations. We're still waiting on Istanbul, where the difference is 25,000 votes, according to the latest tally, in favor of the opposition. Correspondent Shona Bhattacharya has more.
The Kadıköy neighborhood is on the Asian side of the Bosphorus. It's an area residents describe as a stronghold of the opposition against the AKP. Here, voters greeted the provisional results with a mix of relief and caution.
We don't know what will happen, but 90% İmamoğlu won the election. Kadıköy citizens are educated. They can look the problem or the right position, from the right position. But the AKP, especially AKP citizen, is looking from the religion.
Of course, we're happy. How could we not be? We need change. This is what we've been waiting for.
We trust the Electoral Commission and no one else. I think there's a strong chance the results will be confirmed.
The AK Party has never lost in Istanbul, the city that saw President Recep Tayep Erdogan grow up and rise to the national stage. The ruling party says it will contest Sunday's results. If the CHP's victory is confirmed, Ekrem İmamoğlu, a former businessman from Trabzon, could become mayor of the biggest, most populated and richest city in Turkey.
Shona Bhattacharya, yeah, it's still up in the air, and it's in the hands of the Electoral Commission, Denise Bagriacic.
Can I have another? I didn't get the question.
It's in the hands of the Electoral Commission at this
Yes,
point.
we are waiting for it, but I think most probably Istanbul will be governing by the İmamoğlu, what I believe. And I just want to add some few sociological point of view for the big cities. I think the new generation, millennium generation, and also Generation Z, who were voting for these elections, and it's AKP was ruling over 17 years, but many things changed in Turkey, and the new media, mainstream, is not existing anymore in this, are not existing anymore in the trends of the new generations. The millennium generation is reading more and more independent media, and we created in Turkey very alternative systems, and I think I found this is a very sociological.
Is that a phenomenon, though, in the plugged-in urban centers, or is it a phenomenon throughout the country?
Urban sides of the countries shows a very young side of the countries. It's normal, dynamic, young, and it's no more emotion, but it's more like the rational decisions comes from the big cities. And this is why I think it's also very important that big cities are choosing CHP, and it's a new, more democratic speech. All the three of the mayors, who were Izmir, Ankara, and Istanbul, they have more woman-friendly cities they were pretending to have. And also women movement, it's so important in Turkey, and it's so powerful. And the opposition parties are very powerful with the women's movement. I just want to underline this. And also they have lots of support from the women, where the most of the women are living in the big cities, are educated, more intellectual, and voting for the CHP. This is a sociological trait.
Rémi Bourgeot, Turkey has known phenomenal growth since the time that Recep Tayyip Erdogan has been in power. There's been this, over the past 2 decades, it's become a world power economically. Is there a gap that's growing between the cities and the countryside?
Well, Turkey has experienced tremendous growth since Erdogan was elected. That's absolutely true. But meanwhile, the large imbalances have developed within the economy. Turkey has traditionally a very large current account deficit, trade deficit, and things improve in that respect only when there's a crisis, a currency crisis. The currency depreciates a lot, and then
what's going on right now with the Lira?
Well, there's a recession right now, and last year there was a tense international environment for financial markets, especially, for reasons related to US monetary policy, and some issues more specifically related to Turkey with its very large external imbalances, foreign debt in dollars and euros.
Because on the campaign trail, Erdogan talked about a plot against the currency.
Yeah, that's a recurring theme of Turkish politics. This international financial plot.
That's something President Trump tweeted about, and so there's no question. It's not a conspiracy theory by Erdogan.
Explain it to us then. What is the plot against the Turkish currency, Onur Erim?
I'm sorry. Come again.
What is the plot against the Turkish currency? Explain it for our viewers.
Well, basically, President Erdogan has been, discussing for a while that the Turkish currency being so volatile at some times were actually intervened by the West, whether it's the U.S. or EU. That's up for grabs. That may have been a conspiracy point until the date that President Trump has explicitly tweeted that if Turkey attacks YPG, that we will crush him economically by moving the Turkish lira to a lower stage. So can nobody tell me that this idea or this fact that Erdogan presented is just his idea. No, this was corrected.
But that's a threat.
By the biggest.
The thing is,
Bourgeois.
it's much more complex than that. Of course, international politics do play a role in currency.
Has there been a
issues.
weaponization of the dollar against Turkey?
Well, there are political issues going on, of course, and when relations were, however, improved at some point, we saw some kind of rally in the Turkish lira's exchange rate. So there's some political part to the equation for the lira, but that's just one part, obviously. And the main part, especially on the longer term, is about these external imbalances that the Turkish economy is facing, and that's really recurring. That's really a recurring scenario that the Turkish economy is experiencing, and since the 90s or even before. So that's a very common thing for Turkey. And then there's international politics, and that plays a role, obviously, but that's just one part, of course. So.
Yeah, the Turkish president who talked about international politics a lot, he campaigned a lot. Recep Tayep Erdogan, who made more than 102 campaign stops in 50 days. The Turkish president, omnipresent. Erdogan, as pugnacious as ever at the age of 65, picking a fight with Australia after the New Zealand mosque attack, and promising to turn Istanbul's Hagia Sophia back into a mosque. Hagia Sophia, which for 9 centuries was the foremost cathedral in Christianity, then one of Islam's great mosques for another 5 centuries before modern Turkey's founder Ataturk made it a museum.
As you know, a while back they changed Hagia Sophia from a mosque into a museum. But God willing, after the election, we will turn Hagia Sophia from a museum back into a mosque.
What was your reaction when you first heard that, Yavuz?
This was something that we had heard before. It's always been on the agenda, always on the table. It was mentioned before in the earlier elections.
Is it a vote getter when he says that?
More or less, yes. I think it's something that he knows he will have difficulties to handle, to turn it into practice, unless he's really squeezed into a corner. Erdogan is not there yet, so he's tried to use it, but to a certain extent, not anymore. He's still powerful. I mean, remember that the elections ended up with the 51.7% in the coalition led on by Erdogan. So this is very important. He claims that it's even over 52%.
But how much in 2019?
He's holding the power.
How much in 2019 is religion a political issue in Turkey?
Definitely, it's on top. It's on the top layers of. If you look at the rhetoric, if you pay attention to what's being said, the symbolic, all these rituals, there has a lot of undertones of religion. It's been going on. It has normalized in the minds of even the secular segments of the society that religion can be a powerful, even aggressive part of the political conduct. But it's an anomaly, but it is part of the Turkish acrimonious political reality of Turkey.
Is it still that, just one question for Denise here on this. Is it still that confrontation between quote-unquote secularists and the faithful of the AKP?
I think it's anymore any confrontation, but I think the opposition is the first time ever more, the polarization creates more consolidation between the parties, and I think now the opposition parties are more democratized ever that they would imagine. They are more open-minded about how the people are dressed up and how they live their religion, and they don't care about anymore these kind of things, more the symbolic things representing, but they are more let's live together, and we don't care about how you practice it or what you believe in. Can I say a word about the elections that I forgot to say it before? I was just making some little research in the big city, in Istanbul especially, and people who used to vote to AKP were not happy with the Syrian refugees. And I think this is a very important thing because they start to, they have more substitutes given by the government to the people who are living in the...
They think there are too many refugees.
Too many refugees, also sharing all this economical social ads like that.
3.5 million of them, yeah.
Yeah,
and this is very important how they choose, and they even I think we love the culture of sharing, and we accept the Syrian refugees. But the reality in the big cities, as I'm underlying again, the life conditions are very hard, and when people start to losing their jobs, and it's automatically they say the others are the responsible, and in a way that the people who used to vote to AKP decided maybe also it's also could be another reason how the change of the big cities.
But it's not one of the top items.
But it's one of the important.
It plays a role,
it's
yes.
Because like a very little change in them.
Yeah. Onur, when we listen to President Erdogan talk about Hagia Sophia, would you say that religion is what's the trend? Is it a growing issue or is it waning as a campaign issue?
First of all, let me just correct your panel. Hagia Sophia has been a mosque for the last 6 centuries, since 1453. It's just not being utilized as a mosque in the last 40, 45 years is all. So that's all he was mentioning. That's number one. Number two, religion, especially in local election, is as part of politics as it would be in France or UK or in the US. I don't think this has anything to do with local elections. If it did, the CHP's candidate in Istanbul, Mr. İmamoğlu, just headed personally a Muslim mass last week. So we are all beyond this. The religion issues may have been in Turkish politics at one time, but it has never been in local politics. May I just add a couple of things that I was cut off before? For those, I know a lot of our friends don't want to talk about this in the West, but for those who are wondering the success or the raise of votes of AK Party in the south and southeastern region, mainly Kurdish region, number one, the trustees in those regions that were appointed instead of the HDP mayors have done a phenomenal job. They are paying back their appreciation to the service. Number two, I think the Kurdish voters have, for the first time, has given a clear message to HDP. Stop being PKK's party, stop being Kandil's party, become Turkey's party. And I think that's one of the biggest things. Now, I know a lot of our Western friends are astonished. From last June to date, that means in the last 10 months, there were exactly 1.3 million new voters that voted. And still to date, right now, AK Party is still the number one party, by far. The coalition is still number one. AK Party, now we talk about Istanbul and Ankara. Let me remind you, in Istanbul, AK Party did get 25 out of the 39 townships. In Ankara, AK Party got 22 out of the 25 townships. Now, I know it's going into too much detail, but in both cities, the voters have voted for AK Party in the town mayors, which are below the metropolitan municipality, and also in both municipal councils. AK Party has an extremely high majority in the council seats. So
for sure. I mean, the AK Party has done well. Just it's been a setback in relation to the previous local elections.
Absolutely, absolutely. This is largely.
Yavuz Baydar, you were going to say.
Well, on 2 points, I think Hagia Sophia is very clear. You cannot go and pray there, whether be that you're Christian, you're Muslim. It's a museum, period. It's been a museum, and there has been the Kemalist politics for decades, and mass praying, organized praying under the leadership of the religious directorate of religious affairs. It is very clear. It has a status set by Atatürk. It's marked by Atatürk. Second point is about the Kurdish vote. I think second point is important. The Kurdish tactical vote was extremely successful, proved to be the decisive factor in the greater municipalities. If you look at Istanbul, Ankara, Adana, Antalya and Mersin, those 5 cities where there is a Kurdish population, and this was very important to break the alliance. And then regarding the southeastern provinces, 7 of the provinces still are strongholds of the HDP. They lost. They probably took that risk, but they didn't lose. If you look at the map, it's a purple meaning HDP. If you look at the map, you still see that they are still keeping a rock-solid grassroots base in those, with a slight loss, because those who did not want to vote for HDP, like 8 percentage points, they did not go to the ballot boxes, and they lost four greater municipalities. And this doesn't mean overall, if you're talking about bringing down or backing, forcing Erdogan in general nationwide, I think Kurdish tactical voting succeeded enormously in this.
Rémi Bourgeot, the next elections not for another 4 years now. So where does that leave Turkey as far as it goes?
Well, it means the government still has a large majority in the country. There's definitely something going on in the main cities, and that's something really to follow, obviously. But the government will mostly go on with its economic policy. I mean, if I speak in economic terms, and it has this large investment plans and infrastructure spending. But the country is obviously facing severe economic issues that they have to address those imbalances.
First recession in a decade. How do you explain the fact that the country is right now in recession?
Well, it's really the effect of this currency crisis of last year, inflation that went out of control, that really had an impact on people's livelihoods, so an impact of consumption and investment. So it's just really
it's cyclical. It's just something normal.
Well, it's not normal because there was really this currency crisis, and it's always looming in a sense because there's this large external deficit. The external deficit has shrunk in recent months because of the depreciation of the Lira. So there's been some improvement in external terms, really, in really aggregate terms. But this crisis, this monetary crisis, if you will, had this impact on growth.
How do you get out of it?
In the short term, they have to put things in order in terms of those spending schemes, especially those investment schemes, credit mechanisms that they've set up, which really fuel the external deficit. So they're trying to put that in order at the moment. On the longer term, it's about growth, about productivity. There are really deep issues facing Turkey compared to other emerging and developed markets in terms of its industrial development, the level of sophistication. There's been a great deal of improvement in that respect, but there are always the same good old issues in a sense. How can Turkey develop its own brands and go further in terms of industrial sophistication compared to the competition of other large emerging countries? And also energy policy is really important. Turkey is a massive importer of oil and gas. So all this is really important. Turkey, in a very complex context, has to really find some stability.
Denise Bagriacek, you mentioned a young population that is changing. Is that young population, your field research, does it find that it's optimistic or pessimistic when it comes to its future?
Turkey? When it comes to Turkey. It's some way optimistic because the young people is always, in a way, they are optimistic, but also pessimist in a way that the country was going. But I think this is why also the change in the big cities is very hopeful for young people. I mean, I'm not saying in 4 years it's not going to change, Mr. Erdogan will change, but I'm saying that it's a good change for some time for young people to see. For 25 years, it's always the same parties. I also think for AKP is a change. A change is a good for even the ruling parties to regain your energy and changing. And what I feel, this is going to be a good thing for whole country. It's not something someone is losing and someone is gaining, but we will see. It's a change is a good thing because Turkey has a very educated and talented young generation, and we are ambitious for it, and I'm very hopeful.
If you consider also the quality or disqualification of the educational system in the past 10 years, if you place it there, it's the dosage of religion being injected into it, all these imam schools, etc., being taking the forefront role. I think that should be weighed against each other.
It's rechanging again. People they see it's not working because Turkish people are really love to education and they really care about their children. Even if in small towns they send them to the big cities. We used to always love we care about the education of the young people, and I think it's very important. So if there is some wrong changes, it's going to change again. And I'm very hopeful.
Very hopeful.
I would like to add something. I agree with your panel about the unfortunate stage that the Turkish education system is in right now. It's largely due to 10 years of destruction by especially by FETÖ terrorists in Turkey on the educational system, and we are paying the price today. At the end, can I just say something? About 1,400 seats were up for grabs in the mayoral elections. AK Party by herself got 56% of these mayorships. In combination with MHP under the People's Alliance, they got 73% of all the mayorships up for grabs. If you can take out or make out Erdogan fatigue out of that, or Turkish president suffering setbacks in local elections, as it says in your bracket, I don't know what success is then.
All right. The number of mayorships vis-a-vis the size of those big cities that went or perhaps will go to the opposition. The final tally has not been validated.
In where AK Party still leads the councils, where AK Party still got enormous number of the townships. Just the metropolitan mayor itself right now seems to go to CHP. So it seems that public is giving still the keys to the cities to AK Party, but with a big warning. And Erdogan has said that he sowed this.
All right, I applaud you for your enthusiasm. We have to leave it there, unfortunately, because we're run out of time. I want to thank you for joining us from Istanbul. I want to thank as well Denis Bakriacic, Yavuz Baydar, Rémi Bourgeot. Thank you for joining us here in the France 24 debate.